Hello, and welcome to the Love Procurement podcast. My name is Paul Zammit, and I'll be your host for this conversation. Today, I'm glad to welcome Kevin Framer to the show. Kevin is a business architect manager at Accenture, where he's focused on delivering digital solutions to procurement and supply chain challenges, particularly in the aerospace and defense industry. But Kevin, I think you know yourself better than I do. You mind giving a quick intro for the audience?
Yeah, no problem. I think you did a pretty good job. I don't have much more to add to that. I've been in this space for just about 9 years now. Work across implementations mainly, a lot of work with iValue, and like Paul mentioned, deep knowledge and a lot of different at-bats with some different aerospace and defense clients.
Well, we're glad to have you on the show today. So we're here to talk aerospace and defense. It's sort of been all over headlines in recent years, both on the commercial side and on the defense side. I'm sure folks have seen a couple of years ago, we had some unfortunate commercial side aerospace and defense news, and it's still pretty well known that some of the big commercial players have huge order backlogs, right? Generally, the world can be a little bit of a crazy place. And with that, we've seen a whole lot of arms manufacturing and ordering ramping up, things like the Rearm Europe initiative. On the US side, the Defense Industrial Base is really focused on revitalizing the supply chain. And so, you know, Kevin, maybe for you and I and folks like us, right? Like this is our day to day. We're sort of tuned into this stuff. But what would you say for folks who don't know, what is the current status quo for most of these A&D manufacturers, especially the procurement teams? Like, what are the challenges that they're facing today in a world where ultimately they need to scale production? And if they need to scale production, they need to scale supply. And if they need to scale supply, well, this is a pretty complex industry.
Yeah, I've had the benefit of being with some of these clients, you know, before transformation, throughout transformation, then after transformation. If I could give a quick tagline on status quo, I would say constraint and complexity. You kind of mentioned it. I think a lot of defense budgets are under a lot of scrutiny right now in terms of cost, but the ask remains the same. So you're essentially being asked to do more with less. You know, and a lot of clients I talked about when I'm before transformation, what I typically see is a lot of disparate systems, maybe ERPs handling procurements. Buyers are being asked to collate a lot of information from a lot of different systems. And we talked about the speed, the order backlog, the complexity. It's really an uphill battle for them to manage all of that, especially with, you know, changing risk events, changing what's important in supplier risk, but also, you know, needing that decision making to get faster and cheaper.
Yeah, I know we had some business cases across a couple customers where they showed that typically compliance was taking like 30 to 40% of procurement FTEs alone, which it's a must, but compliance doesn't actually deliver business. You don't get savings from a good compliance program, right?
Yeah.
And similarly, like I know one of our customers said to me, he just couldn't keep hiring people, like you said. Like the budget's not there, but also like these are not problems that people aren't meant to be data aggregators, right? So we need systems, right?
Yeah, it's the disparate systems isn't something you can hire yourself out of. You don't need more bodies. I think you need smarter tools. You need the buyers to be, you know, at the controls of all of this information upstream and downstream, and being able to make prescriptive decisions, you know, and that's including compliance. But with, you know, disparate systems and having to go through all of that, it's mostly a reactionary type of effort a lot of times from buyers. It's reacting to events because they can't see across the stream, and being able to kind of factor this data and these data points into their decisions. I mean, 30 to 40% used on compliance. It's not a wonder of why, you know, a lot of buyers will see themselves as reactionary when it comes to actually doing the procurement.
Right. and we want to like shift and elevate that role. I think visibility is a good watchword. I remember
Mm.
seeing, I forget where, but one of the big analyst firms said that the typical aerospace and defense supply chain is like 8 to 10 tiers deep, and 80% of the finished products are coming from the supply chain. So like automotive's considered complex, and they go about five,
Mhm. Right.
five down, right? And then a prime contractor who is doing business with the Department of War, or they're like holding all the liability for those 8 to 10 tiers, right? Can you tell us more about this transparency problem, and like how you and your team have solved it for others?
Yeah. So when I've started at a lot of clients, and this, it's not just aerospace and defense, but especially at aerospace and defense, I think a lot of the visibility, even at the first or second tier, a lot wouldn't claim that they have full visibility. With say an ERP that handles the supplier data, a lot of that's managed by AP. Procurement's really not involved. Um, and that's if there's just the one ERP as that source of truth. It really is acting as a way to pay vendors rather than a way to manage vendors.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and getting into say a quality feature or approving suppliers to do certain types of work like aircraft works, that's a lot of certifications. That's likely another system that has no visibility or limited visibility into that supplier data. You have to consider factors as well, like sam.gov or other third-party systems as well that need to be factored into day-to-day decisions. That's another system, right? A third system. And expecting buyers to be able to have that visibility, even in just the first or second tier, when they have those three systems, I think getting 8 to 10 levels of visibility is a large leap. So in terms of what we've been able to do at clients, I think step one is having visibility into that first tier, and that second tier, having all of that information managed in a single source of truth, like a system like Ivalua, and having AP's role to be able to pay, quality to be able to approve, and then procurement to be able to communicate with the vendors, I think is a huge improvement for a lot of organizations. Then you can start to get deeper and deeper into your supply chain and start to use some of these risk factors or third-party factors to be able to be prescriptive, right? Using that information in procurement decisions, sourcing decisions, seeing an article pop up and being able to reach out to your suppliers in a system and say, is this going to affect this particular order or this particular part? Again, like I mentioned previously, rather than reacting to it.
I think that's a good distinction, right? Because companies, they have all the data that they need to do their jobs today, right? It's not that the data is not there.
Mhm.
It's that it's not where we need it to be. It's not like I'm going to launch a sourcing event. I don't have all of the compliance information around what suppliers are approved for this sourcing event there. Like,
Right.
you started talking about systems. It was so much swivel chair. Like, everyone should have a really nice Herman Miller chair and a really comfortable mouse. Because they're swiveling and clicking so much, right?
Right.
Which isn't the case, I know, with the projects you've delivered. These are the problems you're solving, right? But like, I like that notion of the data needs to be in the system of action, and I think you guys have done some stuff around that. With like, I remember seeing like an approved supplier list that I think you've done at a couple of clients. If you want to tell us maybe
Yeah.
a little bit more about it.
Yeah. I kind of alluded to it with, quality in a separate system from the supplier data. Just collecting the required certs, that's a lot of hours in a given, employee's week. That's across quality, it's across procurement, and sometimes across AP. Not just the collecting of that information, right, and having a workflow and getting it approved, but also just the decision of what certifications do we have to collect from a vendor. So when I talk about procurement owning the supplier data, being able to make those distinctions of this is how we're going to use this vendor, even by business unit, and letting that data be able to drive which required documents you now have to collect. That's a system automation, right? To say when the supplier is on their portal, interacting with the same instance that the buyers are, they are prompted with, hey, these are the documents you need to upload, rather than email reach outs. We've all been on email threads that get lost in the shuffle. And now imagine if that's 8 different certifications, questions about how to fill it out, let alone the approval of it.
And it sounds like there's the second side to this, which is like what you're describing to me is I, you know, me, Kevin, and my team, we come in and we set it up so that the machine does the machine work that like systems were always designed to do. And it's suddenly procurement people get to do the people work that like they wanted to do in the first, like manage my spend strategically because I finally have the time, right? I'm not busy figuring out, God, do they need this certification or that one? And you know,
right.
Yeah,
automating the administrative wherever we can and allowing the buyers to be strategic procurement professionals. You know, like I said, being at the controls, seeing across their supply chain, seeing across their programs, rather than chasing certs, chasing documents, you know, loading CPSR files. You're there in that Herman Miller swivel chair, you know, for you said 30 to 40%, you know, collecting those certs, you can increase that number. Trying to keep up with the status quo of complexity and constraint, I think, is a tall order.
Yeah. And I think you used a 4-letter acronym there that scares some people every 2 years, the CPSR. Let's talk about, you know, automating compliance, right? Like we're talking towards it, but can you talk us through some of the concrete compliance challenges a bit more, like, you know, what you guys have done for FAR and DFAR compliance to take the headache out of that, what you've done for CPSR?
Yeah, you know, I wouldn't be a good practitioner if I didn't break down some of the solutions we did in terms of levels. I don't want to say complexity, but there's levels of depth you can get with your solutions. And I think a lot of times the level 1 solution, as I'll put it, gets underestimated in terms of impact. It's something I'll steal from you that we've talked about at the NCMA conference. Even a small change, while not flashy, maybe in selling the business case, when you consider that time saving at scale, it's pretty significant. So a level 1 solution we've done for FAR and DFAR, we've talked about, you know, swivel chair. Prime contract is another system, right? The FAR and DFAR flow downs come from there. Just being able to integrate that information into iValue and having that sit on the subcontract, if that saves a buyer 2 hours a week or a supplier 1 hour a week, multiply that by 100 buyers, and there's significant savings there. Now, I'll have to talk about the flashy, a level 2 type of solution there, integrating that FAR and DFAR in a tool like iValue. Once we have that data in a system, there's a lot we can do with it. You know, we've even at one place been able to auto-generate a PDF with the flow downs and add that as an exhibit as a part of your contract package. So now, again, suppliers are on iValue as well. So we have kind of both sides of the fence looking at the flow down clauses, signing that contract package, and enforcing compliance that way. And that's, you know, that's 100% compliance there, being able to do that.
And there's another side to it too, which is we're making it easier for people, but there's also a de-risk, right? Like compliance penalties are expensive, non-compliance penalties, right? If the system does it, the system doesn't get it wrong, right?
No, absolutely. The CPSR as well, the scary 4-letter acronym. Yeah, I've heard the term dread used with it, that deadline coming up. Again, there's levels of depth that we've done. We've talked about different systems. I think a level 1 that can't be underestimated in terms of time saved is having a place in your S2P tool where you can create your CPSR files. We usually put that right on the purchase order. So that way we can include compliance in the workflow to be able to do a lot of the CPSR generation up front, which I think a lot of the dread of the CPSR deadline is a result of a lot of that collection is after the fact. rather than including CPSR in the workflow, able to load it onto the purchase order. Everyone's looking at the same document and being able to get it approved before it goes out, and certainly before it shows up on audit lists.
And it's sort of like there's a line that goes through source to pay, and I feel like compliance is on that line, right?
Totally, yeah, and it's a lot of times I've heard it called that digital thread between suppliers, sourcing, contracts, and PO. Now, getting into the flashier solve for something like that, that data, right? If you're using the tool to do your solicitations, your sourcing events, negotiate and sign your agreements, including your teaming and your NDAs, like I mentioned with the FAR and DFAR kind of generating files, there's no reason why in iValua we can't grab the files of the upstream activities linked to that order and automatically fill that CPSR package. Again, taking that administrative away from the buyers and allowing them to act as buyers.
And digital thread's a good way of putting it, because I think that leads us to the last thing that maybe the last thing or the second to last thing, depending on time, that I think we want to talk about, which is a lot of work that's done in A&D is a little different from other industries because it's project and program based. You win a contract, right, to deliver some sweet new thing to the government. You manage that as a program, which extends across like lots of different stakeholders, lots of different activity. Procurement kind of has a bigger role in the revenue generating side of the business than maybe other industries, because you're kind of directly linked to the work you're delivering to the government, right? So can you just talk us through some of the challenges of project-based work and some of the successes that you've helped customers with?
Yeah, project-based work, it's a lot of the same challenges, although I think the stakes are raised here. You mentioned it, right? Procurement is often the first decider on a program's profitability. If the procurement team can get things on time within compliance, then the program's likely profitable. And if it can't, it's going to eat directly into the program's profit. So the complexity remains the same, but we're talking about thousands of items, 8 to 10 tiers of supply chain, right? It's the same complexity, the same constraint, with higher visibility and kind of direct impact to the bottom line. So procurement's not a cost center in this aspect. Procurement is a revenue driver and can take away profitability. So kind of everything we've talked about prior becomes even more important when you're talking about program-based work.
Right, because I've got 12 sourcing projects and 16 contracts and 300 POs, and they're all tied to one program. Can I see that all in one place? Can I enforce things from a compliance perspective just to that program? So on and so forth. Yeah. What about so I really like what you said about procurement's role in profitability when we've actually won the business. But does procurement also have a role in helping win business, right? Like sales side activity?
Yeah. You must know some of the use cases we've done. These are perfect lead-ins. Yeah, this is, we talked about level 1, level 2. I would put this at a level 3 type of solution. Very flashy and slick, but creating bids or going to get awards, right? As an aerospace and defense company, you often still have to source. So creating that bid package involves some of the activities we can do in iValua. So what we've been able to do is kind of load a BOM, right, of the components you would expect to then have to put in your bid, and being able to leverage PO history, quote history on those parts of existing vendors. That's data that exists in the system. And we're able to rise certain, price history to the top on certain components from a number of factors, right? We can use supplier size, supplier diversity, price, bid validity, quantity, matching what the bid requires, and being able to say, hey, this is a reasonable price that you've gotten within a reasonable time frame, while highlighting certain components that don't have that match, where you do need to go out to market and get quotes for those to be able to create your bid package. And then in easy extract, and all of a sudden you're using your S2P system to win business, rather than after award save costs during your business.
Which is pretty cool. And I know we're talking about system, but it's procurement people who are doing that, right?
Right. And it's procurement people who are doing it previously in Excel, swiveling to different PO history, different bid history, or often having to go out to bid so many times because they just don't have that visibility into that information that they've had prior, or even, potentially used.
I love it because it's a good message. Like I was a consultant in a past life too, and I remember when I first showed someone in AP that we were going to automate the three-way match, she was like, "What happens to my job?" And it was like, no. We are elevating your role. Like
Right.
you are about to have better impact because the system is going to help you and enable you to do that. And like I think what you just described really well in this L1, L2, L3 successes that you've had, it's a good marker for what others want their teams to achieve, because it's a people thing at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And using that same level 1, level 2, level 3 analogy, there's the time it takes, and I think I said this prior, but you can't underestimate, even a level 1 type of solution of just getting the visibility and everything into one system on how much that is going to save at scale, or even drive in some of the use cases we've talked about.
Let's finish by this is the Love Procurement podcast, so we have to finish by sharing the love. You may have just said this already, but what piece of advice would you like to leave your listeners with?
You're right. I did just say that, but I can change the kind of topic of that. You can't underestimate changes at scale. I am ripping from you again, but it's going to be me saying it. So in a recorded podcast setting, in terms of implementing artificial intelligence into all of this is, everything anybody's talking about. I think utilizing the thought that even a small change when implemented at scale is going to be a large time saver for your organization. I think the example you used, Paul, was contract summary. Just being able to generate that via AI, maybe that's 1 hour a week, but when you consider who's generating it, 100 buyers, and then maybe who's approving those contracts and using that summary, 500 different approvers, that's a lot of time saved. So don't be so interested in the flashy use cases with some of these things like artificial intelligence. Get it in at a level 1 level with your users, and you'll see a lot of growth. And then you can move to the more level 2, level 3 type use cases.
I like it. Get good data, good visibility, good process, good experience, right foundation, you'll do well.
Absolutely.
That's what I hear. Cool. Where can guests connect with you? LinkedIn, so on and so forth.
LinkedIn's the best route. Feel free to reach out, discuss, I value implementations, transformations at a whole. Happy to have conversations on there.
Cool. Well, Kevin, it's always good to see you. Always good to have this chat. Really appreciate you having on the show. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in today to listen. And we'll see you next time on the Love Procurement podcast.